Hi, I'm Lauren Elkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. And in this video, I am going to teach you how to make Luceta. You'll notice that I say make and not knit because Luceta can be made either with a Lucet, which is a knitting fork, or with I-cord. And if you look with me down quickly, you can see that Luceta has beads on a cord. This piece I'm showing you is actually the I-cord piece. And then it is knotted and has a hammered silver ring with a crisscross in it and another knot, and then a really whimsical modern beaded fringe. I'll be teaching you each step of how to make Luceta, both with the Lucet, and then I'll teach you how to do the I-cord stitch if you decide to work with knitting needles instead. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing that we should do is talk about the materials that you need to make Luceta. If you got a kit as part of Lola's Choice, my knitted kit club, or got one from my shop, or you are going ahead and finding your own materials to make a Luceta, let me give you an idea of everything you'll need to get going. First up, you're going to need a Lucet. A Lucet is otherwise known as a knitting fork. They believe it was used by Vikings in the medieval times to make a cordage that they used on their garments. And what it does is create a strong square cord that is slightly springy, and you'll see that as you start to work with it. If you've never worked with a Lucet before, I did make a separate video that teaches you the no-turn Lucet stitch that I use in Luceta, and I highly suggest going ahead and watching that video before you jump in with this. So one, you need a Lucet, or if you're going to make Luceta not with a Lucet, you'll need 2 size 1 double pointed needles. Let me show you those under the little camera just so you can see them. So these are 2.25 millimeter needles. That's up to you if you want to work with a Lucet or with double pointed needles. Next, you'll need some way to place beads on your stitches. I use a piece of super floss. You could also use a small diameter crochet hook. You just have to make sure it's the right size that will fit through your beads and go onto your yarn. And I actually found for this pattern that it was easier for me to work with the super floss than to work with the small size crochet hook. Next, for the very end, when you're going to make the fringe, I found a dental floss threader or some other beading tool to be really helpful to work the fringe at the very end, and I'll show you how to do that. You'll need some yarn. This is, oh, I forget how many yards it is. I can go ahead and look at the pattern. That's really silly that I wasn't prepared with that. 22 yards. There you go there. 22 yards. This is a mercerized Pima cotton. You could really use any smooth, strong yarn. You just want a yarn when you tug at it a little bit that it won't break easily. If you had some lovely silk, that would make an absolutely gorgeous Luceta, or embroidery floss. I think you'll find that there's a lot of yarns that will work well. This is like a heavy fingering weight. I would relate that to in knitting yarn terms. If you're used to looking at yarns based on weight for knitting, I would call this a heavy fingering weight yarn. So not quite as heavy as sport weight. The next thing that you'll need is 3 different colors, and let me spill these out so you can see them because they're so pretty. 3 different colors of square Miyuki seed beads. This is about 7 grams total. You'll need the bead that you'll use the most of, you'll need 23 of, and then the other beads, let me do math in my head, you'll need 17 of. So square seed beads. And then finally, to finish off the fringe and add that little ring, you'll need a 3/4 inch hammered metal ring or some other decorative ring. And then these are 2 size 6 Miyuki seed beads, and they're used at the very end of the fringe right here, just so you can see where that's used. So those are all the materials in your kit. Obviously the needles are not in your kit. The other thing I think you'll find is very handy to have on hand is just some kind of small crochet hook. Some people work Lucet stitch is just with their fingers, but I find a crochet hook to make it much easier to work with my Lucet, especially with smaller gauge yarn. So any size small crochet hook is going to help you tremendously. So that's all the materials that you need to knit Luceta. Let's jump into the setup where we're going to be stringing some beads onto our super floss. Now it's time to set up, and that means we are going to pre-string our beads onto our super floss so we're ready to go. You can skip this step and place beads as you go, but I find if you pre-string them on the super floss, then the color that you want is in order and you're much less likely to make a mistake if you want to have the pattern that I used in Luceta. You're going to do this step whether you're working with the Lucet or the I-cord. So let's look down here. I came up with this lovely kind of peachy taupe color version to work on. And I've got 3 different colors of square Miyuki beads. And you'll see that these 3 different colors, you get to choose which is A, which is B, and which is C. That's entirely up to you. And once you decide, if it helps you to write it down on your pattern or whatever you need to do, go for that. And then you'll just open up your super floss, and you'll notice with your super floss that there's a stiff tip on one end and there's a little bit of extra floss right there. You're gonna wanna cut off that end of floss before you go to work with it. And then what I like to do is just take an extra bead and on the other end of your floss, tie on a bead, and then that will act like a stopper as you go to string on your beads. Now, when you go to string on your beads, I've already got them all strung on for you here with a stopper. You'll be stringing on 3A and then 3B and then 3C. And then you'll see that it has you stringing on 1A, 1B, 1C, 8, 9, 10, or 11 times. And that is based on the size that you're making for Luceta. All of that information is on the first page of the pattern. And I find it really helpful when you're deciding on a size to go grab a tape measure and just kind of hang that tape measure around your neck and see where you like a necklace to hang on you. It's going to be different for everybody. I like my Luceta to hang a little bit longer. So just use that measuring tape to kind of simulate what length necklace you want to have. And then you'll string on that 8, 9, 10, or 11 times for the size that you're making. And then you'll string on one more A bead and then 3C, 3B, and 3A. And that is all written into the pattern for you. Once you've done that, you're ready to go, either working with the Lucet or working I-cord. I'll show you first how to work with the Lucet, and then I'll quickly show you how to work the I-cord version if you decide that you want to work that version instead. Let's get going. Okay, we are ready to jump in with the setup with the Lucet. When I was writing this pattern up, it's one of those things that's easier to show you than it is for me to write up and you to read through. So what I'm about to show you is written up in the pattern, and I think that this video is going to be really helpful for it to make sense. So the first thing for you to do is to make sure you know which is the right side and which is the wrong side of your Lucet. The right side says Lola's Choice, and the wrong side on this one that I had made for me says Katrinkles. So with the right side facing, take your tail, feed it through the hole in the Lucet, and give yourself about a 10-inch strand right there, a 10-inch tail, and that's so you have enough for working the fringe later. And now you're going to take your cord and you're going to go around the right prong and in between the prongs. and then you're gonna go in front of the left prong, in between the prongs again, and then in front of the right prong. And now you're gonna see, to keep some tension on that yarn, I'm just gonna put it in between my fingers on my left hand. I find when you're doing this setup, if you have a little bit of tension on your yarn, it's really helpful. So now I'm just taking a little crochet hook. You can do this with your fingers. I just find it easier with a crochet hook. And I'm gonna lift up the loop underneath that loop, up and over, and then I'm gonna grab my working yarn and pull it to the right, kind of tightening things up. And now I'm gonna take my Lucet and I'm gonna turn it clockwise. So the right prong is turning towards me. And then I'm going to bring the yarn over this right prong right here, and I've got the wrong side facing, and get a little tension on there. It's always a little goosey when you're loosey-goosey when you're starting out. Lift up that loop, bring it up and over, and then tighten up to the right, turn to the clockwise again, and bring your yarn over the right prong. And now we are ready to start working the beaded stitches. Remember, if this feels really awkward to you, go ahead and practice with some scrap yarn before you dive in with working with the beads, because you're probably going to get frustrated if you dive in working with the beads before you understand how this stitch is constructed. I hope you're having a great time with this. Super fun. Okay, let's jump right in, remembering to have practiced doing a Lucet stitch before you start with the beads with Luceta. So we are working sets to do the bottom beaded section of Luceta. We're gonna start with a Lucet stitch clockwise bead and then a Lucet stitch clockwise 3 times. And I'm just gonna jump right that in and show you how to work that. So we've already done our setup. We're down on the Lucet here, and we're working a Lucet stitch clockwise bead, which is an LSCB. First thing I'm gonna do is lift up this loop, bring it up over the right prong, and then I'm gonna tighten up to the right, and then, this is different than you've done before, I'm gonna pull this to the left and kind of center things a little bit, because we're gonna be placing the bead right here on this loop. And now we're gonna go grab our super floss that's already preloaded with beads. We're gonna go into this loop that wants to have the bead on it from the bottom to the top. We're gonna fold the super floss in half and then feed it through a bead right there so that that bead is sandwiched by the super floss. And now I'm gonna slide that loop off, slide that square bead on, pull the super floss off, and put that loop back onto the prong. Now you're gonna see that in doing that, things got a little loosey-goosey again. So if you pinch at this center and then pull your working yarn, that should help tighten that back up again. And now I've got that bead right there on that stitch. And I am going to turn clockwise and bring my yarn over that right prong. And I've got my wrong side facing right now. So now I'm just working a Lucet stitch clockwise. I'm gonna grab this loop, pick it up, bring it up and over that prong, and then pull to the right. And now I am working a Lucet stitch clockwise with bead again. So I am going to turn clockwise. Sorry, that was the last part of the Lucet stitch. Bring that yarn over. Now I'm working a Lucet stitch clockwise with bead. I am going to pull up from the front right here, and that tightened up that loop. I'm going to bring it over the prong, and now I'm going to tighten to the right, and then I'm gonna pinch right here and I'm gonna tighten to the left. And that kind of centers this stitch and tightens things up a bit. All right, and now it is time to place a bead. So I'm gonna go into that loop right there that wants to have the bead. I'm gonna fold the super floss in half so that the long end goes through the hole again. And now that's sandwiched. And I'm gonna take the bead off and slide it on. And then I'm gonna put this back onto the loop. The big thing to keep in mind when you're putting it back onto the loop is to try not to twist that loop, because then you're gonna be able to pull on the working yarn and tighten that up really beautifully. If you twist the loop, it can start making the lucet stitch a little more awkward. And now the last step of working that LSCB is to turn your lucet clockwise, bring your yarn over that right prong, lift that stitch up and over, pull to the right, turn again, lift up, pull over, and now we're working one more stitch with a bead. So first I'm going to pull to the right, then I'm going to pull to the left. Okay, I was hoping this would happen. I was trying to pull to the left, it's not tightening up. So you'll see if I pull up on the loop on the left fork, if I pull up from the front, that's actually pulling this loop. But if I pull this from the back and I'm pinching right there, you can see that it tightened up. And now I've got this big loop on the left side, and I can go into the front of the loop on the right prong and pull that up. So what's happening with your thread is every loop is connected to the next loop. So if you ever have a problem like that, it might mean that you just need to pull up either on the front or the back of the opposite loop to help you to tighten things up. The more that happens, the easier it'll get to see and correct. So now I'm going to place one more bead. I am on the third of the beads that are placed on this set. I'm folding that dental floss in half, slipping it up and over, putting that loop back on, and now I just need to tighten up right there. Great. I turn, and now I'm working the last LSC of this set. I'm going to lift that up and over. You can see why this crochet hook really helps. I can't imagine doing this with your fingers. I could not get into doing that. Turn one more time. And now we're working an LSC and then LSCB 3 times. So we're not beading on this side. We're going to start beading on that side. We're going to lift this up and over. Pull that. I'm going to turn. Lift this up and over. And now I'm going to pull to the right. And then I'm just going to kind of hold that tight so that I can pull it to the left to tighten up. And then I'll be able to place a bead right here on this side. And you're going to continue on like this. It might be awkward. Don't be surprised if you have a few false starts while you get going with this until it becomes comfortable. I promise you that once your hands build muscle memory and you start to understand what that thread is doing, that it's going to get easier. Let me show you what this looks like when you work through all of those 3 sets and you have that all on your lucet ready to go. I've got that all ready for you. This is like a cooking show where I've got your setups all ready for you, right? You know how they pull the cake right out of the oven and it's like you can smell it? That's what I've got going on here, a cooking show with Lola. So here you go with all 3 sets of the beads ready to go, done. And now we're going to be diving into the next step, which is working the lucet stitch without beads and no twist. Okay, you've worked that bottom beaded section and now you are ready to work your no twist lucet stitch. And basically what you're doing is working an area that is plain without any beads on that. And that becomes this section of the necklace of the lariat, that where you're working the knots and adding in the hammered ring. So you have this whole area that is plain, and you're gonna work plain for 5.5 inches. I just wanna go over that with you. You're working a lucet stitch clockwise and then a lucet stitch counterclockwise for 5.5 inches. So I'm going to turn my work. I am going to pull that up, bring it up and over. I'm gonna turn my work, pull that up, bring it up and over. Remember, there's a video that shows you how to do this if you haven't worked it before. Now I'm going to turn counterclockwise, pull that up, bring it up and over. Now I'm going to turn clockwise, pull that bottom loop up, pull to the right, and now did you see I lost myself there? That was kind of cool. I was hoping that would happen. I've got the wrong side facing, so I'm going to turn counterclockwise and bring my yarn over the right prong, pull that up and over. Now I am on the right side, so I'm going to turn clockwise. And that's kind of the way you can help yourself if you get lost, know which you are doing, clockwise or counterclockwise as you turn. Because you might have to put your lucet down, although you're not going to want to because it's very addictive. So continue on with that for 5.5 inches, and then we're going to jump into working with beads again, and I'll just show you that quickly to get you off and rolling with your Luceta. All right, so you've worked your plain section, and it's time to start working with the beads that happen along the long part of the strand of your lariat. So I am all set up here, and I'm ready to work in LSCB, which you've worked before. I just want to show this to you one more time. So I am going to take this loop, pull it up, bring it up over that right prong, and I'm going to pull things tight. And now I'm going to pull this all the way to the left. And that's the really important step that's different than what you've done before for placing the bead right there. And then I'm going to go grab the super floss. Remember, you're all set up, ready to place the next color of bead. If you've pre-strung them correctly, that means you don't have to think right now. You can just grab it and go. And you're going to lift that up and over. And remember, the other trick to having success with this is not twisting that loop when you go to put it on, and then tighten it up again. There you go. So your bead is on, and then the last part of that is going to turn your work clockwise, start your lucet clockwise, and bring the yarn over the right prong. And now I'm working a lucet stitch counterclockwise. So I'm going to pull that up, bring that up and over. And now I am going to turn my work counterclockwise, bring it over, pull it up. And now you're going to work that no turn lucet stitch, where you're working a lucet stitch clockwise and a lucet stitch counterclockwise for around 7/8 of an inch, let's say. And what all my testers found, and I found as well, is go ahead. Of course, this is happening because I'm talking to you guys and not paying attention. This gets lifted up and over. Let's just try that again. There we go. We're all good. What I found is if I just kept working, I stopped when I had about 7/8 of an inch, and I counted how many stitches I worked. So as you're working, if you want to count, and then you'll have an idea of how many times you need to work for 7/8 of an inch. And then you'll be ready to place a bead on the opposite side of the bead that you placed last. So you're going to go back and forth. I'm just continuing to work. I'm not sure I'm going to work the whole 7/8 because the stitches are exactly the same. Nothing has changed for you. You've learned everything you need to know except for that finishing bit for making the fringe. So we're gonna jump ahead and pretend that we have finished a whole necklace, and I'm going to show you how to work that fringe and then how you work the hammered ring in, because that is something that's gonna be really easy to show you in a video. I hope this all makes sense. Definitely ask questions. Don't forget, I'm always here to help you. Okay, we are ready to work the fringe at the bottom of your Luceta. This is super easy to do. Just do exactly what I'll show you. It's written up in the pattern. And what you're doing is putting 3 square beads down at the bottom to create a little bit of fringe. And we're just gonna pretend that this piece is all the way done, and we're going to do the fringe on the end here. And what you're going to do is take your dental floss threader or a large eye beading needle, put your 10-inch tail that you left when you started this through that threader, and then go ahead and string a bead, one of your square beads, onto your yarn just like that. And then you're gonna go grab another one and you're gonna string on 3 beads total. And then you're gonna string on the one of the round beads that was in your kit. I actually started this by using a square bead, and I really didn't like the way the fringe landed at the bottom, and I grabbed a size 6 round bead, and it just looks so much better that that's how I work it from now on. And now what you're gonna do is take your dental floss threader and go back through those square beads. This can be a little bit tight, so it's easier to work it 1 bead at a time to pull the yarn through there, and then you'll be able to tighten it up when you're done. So you're just gonna pull it through all 3 and then tighten it up and weave in that end. The last step that I want to show you is working with that ring. So there's your little fringe. And see how I just tighten it up right there? And you're ready to go. And then you'll just weave in this end, and let's look at the last step. So you've got your Luceta all the way done. What I like to do is line up those last 2 beads from the beaded cord and then tie a knot with the 2 strands held together in the plain section, making sure that these 2 beads land pretty parallel to each other. And then what you'll do is take your ring, and you'll notice that you have one tail that's longer than another tail. Put it over the longer tail, pull up the cordage through your ring, and then feed the other end of the cordage through. So you've made a little crisscross right there. And then hold these 2 ends together and tie a second knot underneath. And you might find that you need to pull one end through and the other end through. I'm gonna get one more end through there. This is gonna be the hardest part, watching Laura tie a knot in her yarn. There we go. So you've got a knot above and a knot below your X right there. And your Luceta is all done and ready to be worn. I want to show you an alternate way to work the cord for Luceta, and that is by working I-cord. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Okay, let's say that you don't want to work with a Lucet and you'd rather work with I-cord. That is absolutely fine, and I'm going to show you the few things that you need to know for working Luceta with I-cord instead of with a Lucet. The big difference between the Lucet and the I-cord is the I-cord is much more round and plush, and the Lucet makes a cord, if you look down with me, you can see that it's much tighter and denser and smaller. Here I'm wearing the I-cord version, so you can kind of see how that's much more round and plush in the I-cord. and it's much tighter with the Lucet. So let me just show you how to work the I-cord. You probably have worked I-cord before. I start this with casting on 3 stitches with a knitted on cast on. You need to give yourself a nice long tail for working that fringe. And then you'll go ahead and make a slip knot and then put that onto your needle and tighten it up a bit. And you'll just have to cast on 2 more stitches. A knitted on cast on, I think, is one of the easiest cast ons. It's what I teach kids because you're literally teaching them how to knit while you're working it. You're going into the stitch on the needle, grabbing your yarn, pulling it through, and then putting that stitch back onto the left hand needle, creating a new stitch, wrapping the yarn one more time, and placing it on the left hand needle. And now all of a sudden I have 3 stitches and I'm ready to jump in with the pattern. If that is new to you and you've never worked a knitted on or lace cast on like that before, I do have a separate video on my YouTube channel that you're welcome to watch if you want to kind of brush up on your skills or learn more about it a little bit more in depth. So now I'm ready to just knit 3 and I'm working I-cord, and the biggest trick with I-cord is that you never ever turn your work. You always slide your stitches to the other end of your needle. So I've knitted 3 and now I'm just going to take those stitches and slide them to the other end of your needle. When you work I-cord, you need to either work with double pointed needles or a circular needle. I don't like working it on circular needles because I find that the cord just gets in the way and it's kind of frustrating. So short double points are my favorite thing for working I-cord. So now we're ready to jump right in with the beading. And the first thing we're going to do is PBK, which stands for place bead and knit a stitch. So we're going to grab our super floss that's preloaded with our beads. We're going to go into that first stitch with the super floss, fold it in half so that the super floss tip is running parallel to the rest of the floss. Go grab a bead, slide it up. So now that first stitch is kind of sandwiched with the super floss, and I can slide that bead down. You've got to be kidding me. So I can slide that bead down on and put that stitch back onto the needle. Now you'll go ahead and knit that stitch. And now you're going to knit 2 more. I find the first row or 2 of I-cord can be a little bit frustrating just until things tighten up and you start to see that cord a little bit. So you're going to work that same row 2 more times. Let's do it 1 more time together. The first thing we're going to do is place a bead. So we're going to grab that super floss, put it into the stitch, fold it in half, go grab a bead, slide it down onto the tip, slide that stitch off, slide that bead on, put that stitch back onto the left-hand needle. That went more smoothly. And now you're going to knit that stitch and the next 2 stitches. And the biggest thing with I-cord is that you never turn your work. So now I'm going to slide those stitches to the other end of my needle and go ahead and place a bead on this first stitch and work across. And then you're going to follow the pattern as written and you'll be knitting 2 and placing a bead and knitting the 3rd stitch. So you're mimicking what you did with the Lucet cord, but with I-cord. So that's really everything that I have to teach you for working the I-cord version of Luceta. There you have it. 2 ways to work Luceta. Definitely let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help you. You can leave comments here or in my Ravelry group or email me, whatever. I just want you to have success with this. Lola and I are super excited to see your Lucetas come off your Lucets and your needles. If you aren't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would love if you took a moment to do that. I've got some fun things lined up in the next few months and I want to be able to share them with you. So happy knitting.